Roksan's a company that somehow seems to fly under the radar. I mean, you don't tend to see a lot of their products being reviewed, certainly on YouTube. They've been around since the 1980s and have established themselves a solid reputation in the industry with their turntables. The Roksan model first saw the light of day in 1985. It had a belt drive but no sprung sub-chassis, challenging conventions of suspension at the time. There have been various incarnations of their Caspian and Candy amplifiers over the years too, which also have been well received by dealers and a loyal following of customers. The two ranges of amplifiers are still found in Roksan's lineup today. They just don't seem to get a lot of attention. Maybe they don't actively seek out reviews. However, whenever I suggest to someone that they put a Roksan amplifier on their shortlist, the typical reaction is, yeah, you're right, I should check that out. Monitor Audio bought out Roksan in 2016, so recently I contacted the British speaker manufacturer to arrange the Silver 50s for a review, and I was really happy when they replied and said, do you want to check out the Roksan Attessa amplifier at the same time? There are two versions of the Attessa. The non-streaming amplifier sells for £1,099 and comes with the DAC, but it's the £1,599 streaming variant that really caught my attention. It's fitted with the BluOs module that's developed by Lembrook and found in their brands NAD, BlueSound and PSB. Cool stuff, as it's one of the slickest user interfaces in the industry. The all-metal chassis measures 432 by 346 by 76 mm, and the 10.4 kilogram weight is your first indication that Roksan haven't skimped on the amplifier. Imperial measurements are 17.0 by 13.6 by 3.0 inches and 22.9 pounds. There's a button to take the unit out of standby, 3 discreetly hidden playback buttons to play, pause, advance and retrieve selected tracks. I'm a fan of the clean looks with visuals dominated by a centrally located volume dial. I'd have preferred a numerical LED display located in the centre of the knob rather than bars indicating volume to the right, but that's probably just me. However, I think more people are likely to have an issue with the input selection. Having to press and hold in the central knob to select between the numerous analog and digital inputs is an exercise in dexterity. You can also wind up accidentally muting or unmuting the device, as this function is also accessed by a short press of the central knob. Perhaps a fourth button to toggle between input selection and attenuation could have been accommodated, either alongside the playback buttons on the left or on the right next to the 3.5mm headphone jack. You don't have to use the remote because of the app, so I don't mind, but I'm sure some of you will look upon it like something raided from an Amazon parts bin. On to the business end, the speaker binding posts are pretty close together, so just take note if you use chunky spade connectors. There's a moving magnet phono input and 2 line level RCA inputs, along with pre-outs to connect to external power amps or powered subwoofers. The 2 optical digital inputs are limited to handling signals of up to 24-bit 96 kHz, but the coaxial ones can deal with 24-bit 192 kHz PCM. The Attessa will connect to your network via the Ethernet port or wirelessly if you fit the supplied Wi-Fi dongle. The USB inputs can also be used to access music stored on external drives. Finally, there's the usual connections for system control. Here's the internals of the Roksan Attessa. Starting with the left-hand side, and we have an AC inlet filter that's covered next to a very large toroidal transformer from Norwegian company Nortel, good quality part, rated at 400 VA, larger than what you normally find on this class, certainly in comparison to the likes of Arcam, Exposure, Name and Audiolab. There's the power supply filter caps, and they're from Irish company Electronic Components. Don't know too much about that brand, but it's reassuring to find a European manufacturer of caps on an amplifier at this price. I bet they're fairly decent. Each one's rated at 6,800 microfarads, so that's 13.6 per side, 27.2 in total. And that is on the low side. Certainly with such a large power transformer, I'd have expected more capacitance. And what that capacitance does, it helps to smooth out the incoming AC into a more stable DC, as well as provides a short-term current reserve for those transient peaks and attacks. Mounted to the heatsink are 8 output devices from Toshiba. Again, twice the number you'd normally find on an amplifier in this class. Toshiba, that's good quality parts. They're the BS5200 range, and each one has a peak current of 15 amps. And because you have 2 PNPs and 2 NPNs per side on an AB amplifier like this, that potentially means that there's a peak current rating of 30 amps. Now, to give you some kind of context, the Audiolab 7000A has half the devices and a peak current rating of 9 amps. Now, assuming that obviously these caps don't place a limit on the peak current capability of this amplifier. Over here we have one power amplifier module on this power amp board, and there's an identical one on the other side. Going back up this side, and here is the preamplifier section, which I should imagine also includes the phono stage and the headphone amplifier. There might be some preamplifier functionality just below that board as well. That's the digital section, and that board, which is partly shielded, is the BluOs streaming module. They've shielded it because it's so close to this transformer to try and protect it from a bit of noise. Ideally, you'd want that board a bit further away from that transformer. So I'm pleased that they've gone to the trouble of providing some shielding. And below that, which you can't really see, I should imagine is the digital board, which includes the DAC and the other digital interfaces. And the DAC is based around the Texas Instruments Burr Brown PCM 5242 chip. So yeah, there's some good quality parts in there. I'm going to talk about the amplifier section of the Roksan Attessa first, and then the DAC section separately. If you buy the non-streaming version, the one without the BluOs streaming app, the amplifier is exactly the same price as the Audiolab 7000A that I recently reviewed. That's going to be my main comparison, as I can see a lot of people cross-shopping the two amplifiers, and I was fortunate enough to have both here at the same time. They have very different personalities. The Audiolab is all about detail and precision, whereas the Roksan has a much fuller presentation and the details just gloss over you. It's not that the Attessa lacks detail, it doesn't. It's more about where your attention is drawn. The 7000A has superb bass definition, crisp mid-range transient attacks, and a quiet enough background to allow notes to have a decent decay. It'd be an easy candidate for my top award if only it had a little bit more bass weight and vocals and lead instruments were a tad better fleshed out. The Roksan isn't far behind when it comes to resolving information, but the bass isn't as well defined. The transients are softer, even though the top end is just as revealing, and the music is laid out in a similarly wide soundstage with a modicum of depth. Within that soundstage, everything is a little bit more precisely located with the Audiolab, but the Roksan has greater bass weight and more body to vocals and instruments. It might be extra harmonic distortion masquerading as warmth, but it means with certain recordings it's the Attessa that sounds free-spirited, whereas the 7000A sounds a little too restrained, and with other tracks you'd prefer the Audiolab's greater control, offering deeper insight into the recording, and the Roksan in comparison obscures and softens things. I guess one person's organic is another person's muffled, and that's my point. I wouldn't place one of these amplifiers above the other. They're pretty close in terms of performance with relative strengths and weaknesses, and choosing between them will come down to system matching and personal preference. Please note my comments so far relate to using them purely as amplifiers, both fed with my Auralic Aries Mini streamer powered by an MCRU linear power supply, using USB into a Denafrips Iris DDC and then I2S into a Denafrips Venus 2 DAC. It's a totally inappropriately priced digital front end, but I wanted to use the best source that I had available just to see what the amplifier sections were capable of. Switching to the internal DACs changed things. The Audiolab 7000A has an excellent internal DAC based around the ESS 9038 K2M chip that places no restrictions on the amplifier's abilities. I wouldn't claim the same for the DAC inside the Roksan Attessa. It's based around Texas Instruments Burr Brown PCM 5242 DAC chip. It's known to have a full-bodied sound that some people like, but that chip has never been considered the last word in resolving detail. The soundstage shrinks to just between the speakers and some resolution is lost. I'm not saying it's a bad DAC, it's just a little pedestrian in comparison to a very capable amplifier section. As for other comparisons with streaming amplifiers, the Marantz Model 40N may seem quite a bit more expensive at £2,199, but it can regularly be found on sale for less than £2,000. The Marantz is no longer here, but it hasn't been that long since I reviewed it, so I'm happy to leave some general comments about my impressions. The Model 40N is similar in power, similar in resolving ability, come to think of it, similar in tonality to the Attessa 2, both sit on the warm side of neutral. The main difference between the two is the quality of the internal DACs, which is superior on the Marantz, but the Roksan has an ace up its sleeve. The quality of user interfaces is a pretty big deal when you're looking at streamer amplifiers, and here the Model 40N can't compete. The BluOs platform used in the Roksan Attessa is one of the best in the business. So let's get into that. Setup is straightforward. Start by downloading parent company Monitor Audio's Maestro Unite app on your Android or iOS device. Follow a series of simple on-screen instructions that involves naming and selecting the Attessa amplifier. A code will appear on the amplifier screen that you'll need to type in to pair the device, and you'll be asked for your Wi-Fi password if connecting wirelessly. Once you've configured the Attessa using Maestro Unite, it's unlikely that you'll need to use the app again. It has some handy features though, such as adjusting the input sensitivity so you can match the volume from different sources and the icons used to identify the inputs. There's a left-right balance, but there's no tone controls. It's the BluOs app that you're likely to be using. It's well integrated, allowing you to adjust the volume and switch between other analog and digital inputs on the Attessa. You're not just restricted to using it while streaming. It's the combination of how intuitive everything is laid out, quickly it loads, and the quality of the graphical display itself that makes the BluOs system a joy to interact with and ahead of much of the competition. My only gripe is whether I was using the Maestro Unite app or the BluOs app, I couldn't find anywhere to power down the device or take the unit out of standby. Maybe I missed something, or there's a technical reason why it couldn't be included in the BluOs app, which is where I'd like to find it. In any case, I'm really happy that Roksan have hung their streaming peg on the BluOs line. Developing proprietary streaming software takes a lot of time and resource. Now, on to speaker pairings. The Monitor Audio Silver 50s currently have me re-evaluating expectations from this market segment. The sheer clarity on offer from these £699 speakers is extraordinary. The Silver 50s are small speakers with limited bass, and there's a touch of dryness to the presentation, which is perfectly balanced by the warmer Attessa. It has plenty of drive to keep those little woofers in check. Go figure, they belong to the same parent company and maybe were designed to work together. Next up was the Ampifier Argon ones at £1,300. These also sit tonally, a touch on the cool side of neutral, but have surprising levels of bass and a more open mid-range than the MA Silver 50s. This is precisely the caliber speaker that I'd use to get the best out of the Attessa's amplifier section, but in order to get the best out of the speakers, I'd have to go for the non-streaming version, save the £500 and put it towards an external DAC. That'd mean upping the budget for an external streamer as well. Speakers that I suspect may struggle to work with this amplifier will be on the warm side of neutral. That was the case with the £749 ELAC Unify Reference UBR 62s that sounded soft and muddled. The Dali Minio SEs fared better, but these £1,499 compact monitors have a highly revealing mid-range. Even with my Auralic Denafrips digital front end fed directly to the amplifier section of the Roksan, the limitations of this amplifier, which I stress is very good for its price, became apparent. There are levels to this game, and the Mini SEs deserve an amplifier that's capable of passing on greater micro details and subtleties within recordings. Finally, the newly launched Q Acoustic 5020s are in for a review, a £599 pair of speakers that have performed excellently so far. I'm still buttoning down their characteristics, but they paired very well with the Attessa. Roksan's first streaming amplifier shows a lot of promise, solidly built with looks and features that are likely to have a high spouse acceptance factor. The amplifier section is right up there with the very best in its category, and the inclusion of a BluOs streaming module is an inspired move. It's one of the best streaming platforms I've encountered. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for the internal DAC. It gets the job done, but let's be frank here. Let's decide down a little bit. I'd like to see a future version with a better quality internal DAC, and whilst I'm at it, why not HDMI eARC as well? Something that I haven't mentioned up until this point. If they can somehow do that and keep the price just below £2,000, I think that'll be money very well spent. All things considered though, the Roksan Attessa offers good value for money and gets a recommended from this channel. It's great to see BluOs being licensed to other manufacturers, and that gets me thinking, what streaming platforms do you use and how do you get on with them? And if you don't, why not? Please share that with me in the comments section. All that remains for me to say is if you like what I'm doing with this channel, you want to see it grow, and you haven't done so already, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Check me out on Patreon. There's a couple of consultancy tiers there that you can access if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also check out the ABA Club on Patreon. It's a great way to interact with me and other Patreons, including face-to-face video calls. But for today, for now, a British audiophile, signing off.